If you like what we do here on Skiba News Nation, please like and subscribe, and also share with others so we can grow the biggest truth-seeking community on the internet. Huge shout out to all of our Patreons out there. If you like bonus content, you want some extra Skiba News Nation stuff, please go to patreon.com/Skiba News Nation.
Welcome to Skiba News Nation, bringing you unfiltered views, news, interviews, discussions, and more. And now, here's your host, Jeremiah Skiba, award-winning musician and son of Rob Skiba.
With the son of the legendary Rob Skiba. Jeremiah Skiba, what's up?
With my great and insightful co-host, Mr. Jake Graham. It's like I don't even want to wake up.
He's on a quest for truth.
Hey guys, you'll never guess where I am. I'm on stage right now at our TrutherCon 2025 venue. Check it out. So guys, I'm here on the stage for our TrutherCon 2025 venue. This is a giant screen behind me. I'm on stage currently where Bryson Gray is going to perform, where all of our speakers are going to present. Yours truly will present as well. I'm the first speaker because we all know the term conspiracy theorist came from Dallas. So there'll be a big podium right here, and then I guess we'll move it when Bryson performs, but so far it looks amazing. Got drinks back there, bar. Got the stage back here. It's gonna be pretty epic. We just did sizing. We're gonna have vendors right where I'm standing. It's gonna be amazing. Look at all this open space. That's what you want when you do a conference, so it's gonna be pretty cool. We got a special VIP lounge that the VIPs will be able to meet after the performer or presenter is done. They'll get to go back there. The official backstage green room right here. We're at the TrutherCon venue, and I don't know if you can see that chair behind me, but it's pretty cool. So this will be like where all of our special guests and stuff and VIPs get to hang out. And then this will be the official Skiba News Nation merch. And then we have rooms behind this wall of VIPs and speakers only and for performers. This is what I'll be seeing on stage. And then right off stage right here, there's the giant screen. It's huge. And then the VIPs would have access to hang out with whoever back here. So make sure you get your VIP tickets at TrutherCon.com. You're definitely going to want to do that. I hope you're excited. It's going to be pretty exciting. Make sure you get your tickets at TrutherCon.com. We're only... Hey Skiba News Nation family, today we have a very special guest joining us, Mr. Greg Carlwood. Welcome to Skiba News Nation.
Hey, thank you.
What first inspired you to do what you do? And if people don't know what you do, can you explain to them, you know, what you do and where they can find you and all that?
Yeah, so I'm basically a podcaster like everybody else these days, but mine's been going 15 years, which is about as long as anybody. When I first started, I felt late to the game because there were like maybe 3 or 4 people doing something somewhat similar. And now there's like 300 or 400 people doing something similar. So little did I know how much room there was. But I started it out because partly desperation. I was a store manager at GameStop and I dropped out of college. So my prospects were pretty low. I basically realized if I'm going to do anything, I basically have to do it myself because nobody is going to hire me for a position that pays well because I have no credentials and no education. So I started it up because I could do it myself. And at the time, I really liked Coast to Coast AM, but it had flaws. It's on the radio. It's chock full of ads. And I felt like a lot of the guests, as soon as they would start to cook, it would break for a commercial. And then to come back, they'd have to find where they were in the conversation. A lot of times those commercial breaks are less than 10 minutes on traditional radio. And sometimes a good story takes 20 minutes. And so I always thought that was bad. And then Alex Jones, of course, I liked for the conspiracy side, but I never liked the tone. I always thought that it was pretty aggressive and it just didn't really match my stoner, nonviolent, anti-war kind of vibe. And so I thought I could blend the two. So I became a less Christian Coast to Coast hosted by a more mellow Alex Jones. So that was kind of what I wanted to go for from the beginning. And really, it was just letting guests talk on a show that has no ads. I felt like, especially 15 years ago, that was a hot commodity. Even today, it's hard to find podcasts that don't use the ad model. Ads make the world go round. All entertainment, basically our whole lives, has been gather their attention with something shiny and interesting to then insert ad here. I didn't want to do that.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I like the fact that no ads. I mean, you can't do premium on those like you can on YouTube, which is, I mean, YouTube premium is so much better than normal YouTube because you don't get any ads. And I like that a lot.
Agreed. And it's just, I also felt from a perspective of wanting to just maintain total independence, really not ever joining a network, never having a manager, never doing the kind of things that make me skeptical when I see someone, hop on the scene and get pushed right to the front. And then they're doing ads for companies that you do a little bit of digging, and Peter Thiel's involved in these companies. Or, I mean, I don't know if you guys do sponsors, and I don't want to bash any in particular sponsors, but a lot of it is things I would not feel super comfortable with in terms of things in the realm of psychiatry, putting people into a psychiatry pipeline, and also pills. People, a lot of dick and hair pills. Okay, great. Well, what happens when you get cancer in 10 years? At least your dick works. Nothing else does. I just didn't feel super comfortable lending out my credibility and name for a couple shekels just to sell Blue Chews or whatever the hell.
Yeah, brought to you by Pfizer,
Right. Yeah, obviously I made these decisions pre-COVID, but post-COVID, and especially in this current climate where the tech bros seem to be really jumping to the front of the line in terms of who's going to control the country for the next decade or so. So I feel better now than I possibly could, because a lot of my colleagues, I don't know if they're super proud about what they're doing, but they're locked in. You get into, you established a process and you get locked into it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting the way you describe allowing the conversation to unfold, because it is true. You really can't get to the meat of something when you're interrupting every few minutes or sliding an ad in there, and some of the more conspiratorial topics in the world really have to be allowed to cook, like you said, for somebody to kind of build the preponderance of evidence of, hey, this is why I believe what people think I'm crazy for believing, right?
Yes.
Now, in doing like a little bio on you, obviously, we've heard some of the comedians like Carlin and stuff over the past, couple decades being like big influences for podcasters. It's interesting how people like that called out some of the mainstream conspiracies that we all experience. It's a big club and you're not in it, right? So whenever we talk about right now, you said how there's so many people that are already jumping on this podcast thing, and back when you started, there wasn't a lot. I'm kind of curious because it seems like there's like a new breed of trutherism that's coming out, where trutherism is now a mainstream thing.
Yeah.
And since you've been doing it for a while, you've seen the change, and I've witnessed it as well, you know, being involved in this area of media for around 10 years now as well. I mean, what do you think about like this new thing where truther is in? It's like, it's now the thing to be, like everybody's, let's get on there and figure this one out, when years ago that was definitely not the case.
I know, it's such a weird schism. It's actually interesting on both ends, because when I started the show 15 years ago, I was very used to having the most extreme opinion of anyone I knew in regular life, willing to go as far as the rabbit hole would take me, and never really finding a place where I was like, okay, that's too far, I got to get off. And then QAnon happened and Flat Earth happened. And then I was like, oh, wait, there's people out there that are going deeper than me, or going to a level in which I think we might be dealing with propaganda to a certain extent. I'm a little more open to Flat Earth probably than a lot of other people are. I like to say with the Flat Earthers, hey, we agree on 99% of so much, and that's rare, so I will take that win. But then, yeah, you have the other side where things that used to be extreme are now tame. They're now part of the official Republican platform, it seems. And there are so many of these guys out there. I don't necessarily want to throw shade at anyone, but there are a lot of guys out there that are, David Icke says, what does he say? Mainstream alternative media. I think that's the term that he has been using. And I agree. It's a little weird, but what are you going to do? You know, we just keep doing our thing. There's people like Amazing Polly who regularly do these exposés, and 7Cs as well, another guy I've had on the show. They do these deep dives into the sponsors of these companies and the agencies that they work for, and they usually track back to some kind of Israeli company or someone that has been funded by the tech bros. I mean, you could even look at Rogan and say, like, I always liked Joe Rogan's show, and I can be naive. And so I watched that trajectory, and I really thought there was nothing super inorganic about it, because I was watching from an early time. And I actually had Ari Shaffir, Duncan Trussell, and Joey Diaz on my show before it really found its lane. And then I found out that Peter Thiel was actually an early investor in Spotify. And so you start looking at how it all works. Oh, okay. So guy with podcast makes a deal for several $100 million to go to the company but heavily funded by Peter Thiel, and then has Peter Thiel on the actual podcast, never really criticizes Peter Thiel. And then Elephant Graveyard made a great video where he made a montage of all the guests Rogan's had that refer to Peter Thiel as a friend or a buddy or a great guy. And it's like, holy shit, when you listen to random episodes here and there, you don't pick up on it. But when you hear 24 people from all kinds of different various disciplines bringing him up and saying how great he is, okay, now I'm starting to see how the relationships affect the content and how certain things are left out of the conversation because of where the money comes from. So it does start to make more sense. Now he made another contract with Spotify that is not even for exclusivity. So it just seems like a gift for playing a certain role. And we could say the same about Barry Weiss. If you've been paying attention to that whole story, Barry Weiss was running this little media organization that, I can't even remember the name of it. It's some generic name like True News or something. But it was basically nothing in a little corner of the internet no one was paying attention to. And it gets bought for a huge multi-million-dollar deal. Larry Ellison or David Ellison, forget which one's the father and son, but basically hires her to start being the new curator of news in their organization. And she got basically a big payout for a company that's probably smaller than mine. Like, what's my valuation if her valuation is this number? It's like, well, the value of something is what someone will pay for it. And the people who like my show don't have money. We're not in the billionaire class. But, it only takes one billionaire to change your life. So Barry Weiss, no shade at you. You did your thing. But it tends to be the blind spot tends to be Israel, as we all kind of know.
Yep. Yeah. So you like conspiracies, kind of like we do, and also I saw Jake mention that you talk a lot about cryptids, and that's like right up my alley, cryptids and conspiracies. Because we're having TrutherCon, this massive event, this truther event in Dallas, and that was the first time the word conspiracy theorist was used to demonize people like us, was during the JFK assassination.
Yes.
What do you think about Mothman? I ask all the people that I have on about Mothman that know cryptids, because I find that one most fascinating.
I agree. Mothman is wild. And I don't know if I buy into the narrative of the harbinger of doom necessarily. It might be something close to that, but I just think that there's too many tragedies that happen in the world that don't have a harbinger. And I don't know if the collapsing of that bridge rises to the level of there should be some kind of cryptid that warns people about it. What happened on 9/11? Where's our 9/11 Mothman? Coming out and telling everybody in New York that something big's about to happen. So
maybe
I don't
flew
know.
into the towers.
Maybe. You can't discount it. A lot of people questioning that footage these days. Maybe it was the Mothman. But I'm more inclined to think it has something to do with heightened states of consciousness that maybe in a realm without time that doesn't use our linear time setup that we have here in the physical, maybe there was a ripple of intensity of consciousness that allowed a portal to open for this thing to manifest. I would be more inclined to think it's something like that rather than A to B, here's a being warning about a bridge collapse. It just doesn't resonate with me. But obviously you get into cryptids and heightened states of emotion and trauma. These things are super connected. So I would think it has more to do with that. I saw a cryptid when I was young, and I had a very non-traumatic childhood, so it's really hard to connect that to much. But I've told the story way too many times. But the long and short of it is, when I was in kindergarten, I remember, because my parents had just moved into this new house, and it was a development in a rural area. So they built this subdivision in a rural area. I sometimes think about that. Like, did some kind of natural energies in the landscape get pushed out because of the development? And what I saw was on the new border of the development with the woods. I also think that maybe I, in retrospect, don't remember that it was traumatic to start a new school. Maybe to a kid that can be traumatic. I don't remember it that way. But just trying to circle around, how could I have seen something abnormal that's supposed to jive with the idea of trauma and heightened states of emotion? But what I saw was walking around the neighborhood with my parents. I looked down in this ravine at the edge of the woods, and there is a hunched over shadow being. I mean, it was like a black thing that when I saw it, I said to my parents, "Hey, come here. There's a weird bear over here." And of course, bears don't live in Missouri. So my parents thought I was just goofing, and they didn't make an effort to really come over and see what I was looking at. One of my saddest moments to this day, because I ended up being the only person to see this thing while my parents were only 50 feet away. Had they just listened and rushed over, they would have saw it, and then we could have always been like, I'm not crazy, right? You saw it too, but just not how it works sometimes. But I saw this thing, and it noticed that I saw it. Another commonality with so many accounts. It looked up at me as if it noticed someone, and then it stood up on its hind legs like it's an animal. It seemed like a humanoid. Oddly, it doesn't fit any real description. I can't just say I saw Bigfoot. I can't just say I saw a gnome. It was something, I say a shadow being because the darkness of it, maybe an elemental, some kind of thing would match. But when it saw me, it took like 5 steps forward and kind of developed, worked itself into a sprint, and then just kind of disappeared. And it was strange. I probably saw it for 30 seconds, maybe less. Time kind of 5 seconds can seem like an eternity when you're looking at something otherworldly. But I was so upset and I was in tears, not because I was scared. I was just so frustrated that they didn't listen to me and see this with me. I made my parents go door to door around that part of the neighborhood, and I'm crying, snot running down my face. I'm like, knocking on doors, have you seen anything weird behind your house? And they're like, no, kid, get out of here. So sadly, that whole story, I'm the only one who saw it, and it lives and dies with me. But it was enough to be like, yeah, some of this stuff is real. Things really can be seen that defy logic. It's not an animal. It's not a person, maybe a wild man kind of thing, but it disappeared. So it's not really a person, but it just, you look at something and it had an awareness that was a higher level of consciousness than just animal. So very strange.
Very, very, very interesting story, and it's kind of like, to psychoanalyze, it's like, this is why he has so much compassion for these people with these outlandish and wild tin hat foil theories, is because, you know, you have that boyish memory of no one believed me, so I'm going to give you what I wasn't given as a child. That's why true. Yeah, that's why I was actually really excited to have you on, because you know, we talked about gatekeepers, right, and the concept of information kind of you know, little sphincters where they don't want, you know, people to get too far into the weeds, and so they direct this conversation. But I do believe there's an opposite end of the spectrum. And that's why I'm so excited to talk with you, because while you can interview, we also interview different conspiracy theorists and researchers and stuff on our channel. There's something special about somebody who has conversations with many different points on the node. You're like a collector of connections, so to speak.
Yes.
And so it's super, you know, valuable, I think, your perspective, because when you speak to enough conspiracy theorists, you can start to make connections, interlocking various theories and things that have been shared, and it kind of gives you a greater vantage point. And I think that's what's so cool about being, you know, a conspiracy collector, because you do get that additional insight.
I agree. I used to really never inject my opinion on the show, because I was just like, I know nothing. The guests here are the expert. And as time has gone on, I probably inject a little more, and it's usually to try to get people out of their lanes, which I think also is just good for a content perspective. You know, you're wearing the host hat, but you're also the producer and the manager, and you're doing this thing by yourself. So you're thinking, like, what's the best content? A good example is Richard Dolan. Love Richard Dolan. Think I've interviewed him 3 times. He is still in the camp of conventional ETH. He started out as like a military historian, and now he's like a UFO historian, but he looks through a kind of a history of war sort of lens. Now, that's kind of his whole bag. So when I have him on, I'm asking him about more of the occult type stuff. I'm like, hey, there was a recent whistleblower, Matthew Brown, who, after he did his interview talking about what he saw while working with government, or what he heard, you know, here's the thing. None of these whistleblowers, from David Grush right on up to the current day, they're never firsthand witnesses of anything. They just talk about a paper they saw or something they heard. It's very frustrating. But after he gave his testimony to George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, the next day he went on a bizarre Twitter rant to Elon Musk about AI and how he knows that they've already killed off some AIs. And he shared the Enochian wheel, like a wheel of the Enochian language from John Dee. And it's like, what does that have to do with UFOs? And there's so many of these things. Like Alan Greenfield is another guy. He wrote The Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts. If you saw Hellier, he was a part of Hellier. And his book basically was saying that a lot of the things people see in the sky are things that come through portals that were opened through occult means. So I'm way more of the opinion now that the ETH, the little gray aliens from some distant planet, that is a huge red herring. And I think anyone that you see who kind of seeded that and promoted that was a military intelligence employ, essentially. It all starts with Roswell. We know military intelligence is heavily involved with Hollywood. So many of the concepts we have of aliens come from Hollywood and these couple of times that the military has, quote unquote, told us something. Maybe it was not from the beginning. And I'm kind of the opinion that it's all occult activity. And in a Christian nation, you can't come right out and say that you're engaging in occult activity. People would go nuts. Yeah. So you say, well, we don't know what they are, and they're actually just from space. So don't worry about it. It's not a cult. And so when I talk to a guy who comes heavily from the ETH perspective, I'm like, what about all this stuff? What do you think about this stuff? Because again, like as a producer of a show, why do I want to be the 100th interview with Richard Dolan that sounds the same? Right. I want to get him to talk about different stuff. And that applies all over the place. I think there's multiple ways you can look at many different things. And 9/11's a great one. We know that the towers didn't fall in the way they told us, but that doesn't mean we really know exactly what happened. Were there bombs in the basement? Was it nanothermite? Is Dr. Judy Wood right? And it was the use of some kind of directed energy weapon. Her book is so goddamn thorough and detailed that I have to conclude she's probably right, even though the technology is far above my pay grade to understand. But she is the only guest in 15 years that made me take a quiz before she would allow me to interview her, demonstrating that I read the book and could understand at least some of it. And to me, that is a little notch in her belt of credibility, because a lot of people just want the attention. She wanted to only talk to people who understood and read the book. She didn't want to get involved in a conversation where it's like, so tell me about your book. Yeah. Like so many can be. So I don't know, but there's a lot of different things you can look at from many different lenses. And if I have someone who is stuck in one worldview, I try to drag them into the other just to see what they say about it. It usually works out pretty good.
Have you seen the new Tucker thing that Tucker's been putting out? Tucker Carlson?
Yes.
The newest one talks about direct energy weapons, and I'm surprised that it was allowed to come out because he was talking about Building 7. So
I get a little annoyed. They're stomping all over my territory.
I know.
It's like, this is that new alternative media. And it's also interesting because I forgot exactly who presented it to me this way, but when COVID happened, you had a lot of these guys who were involved in the traditional media nexus go out independently and start podcasts. And from a certain perspective, it's like, well, yeah, of course. I know there's good money in podcasting. Other people do as well. You don't have to drive to the Fox News offices. You don't have a boss. You can take all the popularity that you've gained from the traditional system and actually benefit fully from it without having all the bosses and all the different people up the chain. So there's a way to look at it where it's like, of course, that would be the move that a guy like Tucker would make. And then there's another more skeptical lens where you can say they've got all the data, and the data clearly showed that people were losing trust in the conventional system. So they had to recapture those minds. How do you do it? You got to go independent. Now, are some of those strings still attached to Tucker? We don't know. We probably never will know. But it seems like they are, because there's a couple of different people who pick up on the rings he wears, the bracelets he wears. There's a lot of symbology of what his dad did for a living. He seems pretty well integrated into the network, and all he's trying to do is put out enough stuff to regain his credibility. And it's more often about what they won't talk about than what they will. But so far, I mean, call me gullible, but I've been liking Tucker's shows. The directed energy weapons one, I'm not fully into. I saw that it is out there. The one right before that is even more interesting to me, where it is about Enochian and Kabbalah and the occult, and the fact that the tech bros are all occultists. And I think one of the clips I saw was titled, tech billionaires all claim to speak to the same entity. And that's scary stuff, but that's my territory. So,
so
it's
Tucker,
a little frustrating.
Back off,
Yeah,
Tucker.
I mean, obviously I want him to back off, but it is what it is. I actually want I just want the truth to be out there and known by more people. And sadly, there's so many brainwashed people out there. We all know the majority of our friends and family circles are probably conventional thinkers, and we just deal with it. This is a part of ourselves we keep to ourselves or talk about in venues like this, and they don't pay any attention to what we're doing. And it's just sad. I'd like to see the truth get out there one way or another. I'm doing fine, but also I wonder, what is the game plan there? You know, if Tucker really is part of this network of, you know, David Icke would say Shabbat, Lubavitch, he would say Sabbatean Frankists, these cults that go very far back. There's indications that he would be a part of, that he's a part of them. Again, it goes beyond my ability to verify, but there seems to be more than enough there to be skeptical of Tucker and to notice that there's hidden agendas there. But maybe it doesn't apply to this particular material. So you're willing to let all the truth come out in this lane so that you can get people to adopt your position in these other lanes.
Yeah, I think Tucker just needs to do a show with you, and then everything would be good.
That tends to do it. You know, I talk to someone firsthand, and all of a sudden I'm just like, I love this guy. I don't know. I don't know why I ever had a problem with this guy.
Yeah. I don't know how familiar you are with our brand naming and stuff. Our podcast kind of formulated out of the Flat Earth movement. Jeremiah's father, Rob Skiba,
yes, I know
was
that.
one of the most prolific, speakers regarding Flat Earth, and my time following and creating a documentary back during the rise of the Flat Earth movement between 2017 2019. I recognized that things that are very outlandish, and there's a ton of cognitive dissonance around titles like Flat Earth, for example. But really, in the underlying meat of what it actually is, the Flat Earth theory is not actually a theory in and of itself, but rather it's a combination of many underlying theories that most people actually can believe as plausible, such as, you start with the moon landings, and it's just, it's beginning to question the reality we've been presented. Allows people to come to a point where they can start throwing phrases around like flat Earth, and so it's really interesting to see how whenever you have many different conspiracy theorists come together and communicate, it allows them to question even further than what their own particular niche is. So it's the combination of all these theories that creates the super conspiracy theorist. And what I wanted to share about my time viewing the Flat Earth movement and all the conferences and stuff was that it wasn't that the people that showed up actually fully agreed and believed on some particular model, but it was that they had a love for the truth enough to go and investigate a claim.
Well
and so
said, yes.
When you have an environment where people who have a love for the truth gather together, whether it's the title Flat Earth or whatever, it's these coming together moments that really spark some of the most interesting conversations. That's what we're trying to do with our conference TrutherCon and stuff, is to try to bring all these questioning minds together. And so, it's really interesting that when you interview all of these different conspiracy theorists, sometimes people present theories that are really, really intriguing. And we wanted to ask you, for your podcast, are there any deep revelations or theories that have stood out to you as like your favorite, the one that really tees it off?
Well, I don't love simulation theory. That's more common because it's so techy. It's the only thing we have as an analogy to look at is, video games and computers, and so maybe we're in a simulation. But I really do think David Icke nails it. I just interviewed him recently, so it is fresh in my mind. And I think David Icke's problem is that he told the whole truth. He gave the whole game out like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, but yet he still has to make money and make a living. So even when I ask David Icke after a 6-year absence, I say, what's the most recent thing that's blown your mind? He doesn't really have anything because he already reached the bottom, which basically is that this is a captured world. He definitely adopts the kind of Gnostic Christian perspective. This is a captured world, but we are all fractals of the Godhead, the supreme consciousness idea. The added element to that I do think is pretty interesting, that I just kind of got into recently, is this idea that if you don't connect, so people's relationship with the higher self, some of it's very conscious and they communicate openly. That would be people who have deep meditation practices, people who go down even the Crowley path of making contact with your holy guardian angel. That is essentially just your higher self. So it can take years to do, but people do go through that and develop a conscious relationship with that part of the self. Then there's people who have like an unconscious kind of guide, call it the intuition. They follow it that way, where it's more like an echo in the back of their head. And I definitely have had moments where I've gotten a strong message in the back of my head. I actually did follow through and I got big results from it. That is awesome. I can't get it every time, and I tend to miss it more than I get it, but it's enough to again confirm that this is a real thing. And then the latest element is that there's this perspective that the Godhead, or let's just say consciousness, the one true bubble of consciousness that we're all fractals of, it needs you to, the notion of faith, it kind of needs you to have faith in yourself, and if you lose that, it will cut you off. So there's an idea that your higher self can make the decision to sever its tie to you because you are affecting it in a negative way. And that to me is really fascinating, because I've always wondered, like, what really is at the heart of depression, or what really is at the heart of these friends that we might have who just can't get it together. They're smart, but they're just always on the wrong page, and they always are like, why me? And the system's out to fuck me, and the Rockefellers won't let me get ahead. Meanwhile, I'm over here doing quite well, talking into a microphone with no education and no training. So like, there are paths to success, but why can some people never find them? And what is at the heart of suicide? Why do some people who you're just like, they would never do that, like, but in a moment of weakness and a temporary lapse of judgment, they do something they can't take back and they end their life. I sometimes am starting to wonder if that is because they truly have had their connection to the Godhead cut off, and it's not necessarily something they chose to do, because we're all kind of in this system, in this soup, living our own lives with the strength of the connection strength for every individual might be far different. And if it were to get severed because your higher self considers you a lost cause, that's just a really fascinating idea to me. And when I look at some people I know out in the world, like, maybe that has happened to some of them, and maybe that it makes me more empathetic too to people who are having a really rough go.
Yeah, to get biblical with it, it parallels the searing of the conscience, to where somebody is no longer willing to listen to that, little voice in their head that's telling them, hey, this is the way to go, this is the way to go. And then when you quiet that voice, it's almost like you're unwilling to follow that higher calling on somebody's life, the supernatural voice that's speaking into somebody saying, hey, you need to go this direction. It's almost like you cut ties with your destiny. You cut ties with,
yes,
the point of direction that, you were meant to go. And
yes,
man.
So just to touch on that, when I talk to people who are in more of the occult realm or have a deep knowledge of astrology, and like, there's been a couple of times where they've unpacked my personal chart, and I don't really know much about astrology, but they're like, you are ruled by Mercury or Hermes, and in my birth chart, that would mean, and I've got like a Jupiter ascending, so Jupiter is big things, obviously. So Mercury runs communication and technology, and Jupiter means bigly. So the idea that I speak into a microphone that is broadcast to 6 figures worth of people, enough people to fill Madison Square Garden several times over, and I use technology to do it, and all I'm doing is communicating, I mean, it is all right there in my birth chart. And things really unlocked in my life once I started doing the podcast and didn't stop. And it did feel like tapping into destiny or true will in some form or fashion. I was scrambling for like a decade, just worrying if I'd ever even be able to afford a house or reach even half the success of my own parents. And it was really, really rough. But now I'm cooking with gas, and it really does feel like if I talk about that in a way that applies to other people, not just me, it's like you got to find your groove. You know, something I took from Jordan Peterson is he would say, men in particular, there's an innate part of us that wants to be an alpha at something, not necessarily an alpha in the traditional sense. Like you got Brock Lesnar walking around out there, you know, how many people can truly compete? But find a dominance hierarchy is the term you would use, that you actually can rise to the top of. At that time, I heard this in retrospect, but I just thought about podcasting where it was, and I thought, yeah, if I'm looking at the people doing this, I think I can do it better than these people, or at least be in the top 20%. And that is what happened for me. So I try to tell other people, like, think about all the things that you're drawn to and called to, and then find a way to monetize that. And then like look at the available options that would be your competitors and think, what do they do right and what do they do wrong? And how can I become the best blend of all? And with the way things are now, you could take any interest from fishing to bowling to anything, and you could definitely be a trainer of such a thing. You know, you could be, you could have a YouTube channel of advanced tips. Like there's so many ways to just be an independent expert on even mundane seeming things. Now, I don't know who manifested here to be the best bowling expert online, but I guess someone did.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like as people do what they love and they make what they love their job, things start to flow naturally. And
yes,
and it is interesting that your particular thing that you love was like investigating all of these various conspiracies and claims, and so you know you could parallel that with, you know, your love for the truth allowed you to be successful. And like, isn't that one of the best, like, I mean, callings? Like it's just like
yes,
like compared to somebody who's the best bowler, you know, are you the best, you know, one of the best, you know, truth hunters, you know, which is a kind of cool kind of, you know, tag.
Yeah. And best is subjective, but you know,
Yeah.
the bank account isn't subjective. And to be doing pretty well compared to a GameStop store manager's salary, I mean, I feel validated, and I don't need any more validation. I don't need any more attention, really, if I could just maintain. But yeah, I definitely think there's something there. And to kind of go back to what you were talking about with the flat earth, like the Skiba name. Oh, I know the Skiba name. You know, it is out there. I had never had Rob on. I had Eric Dubé on pretty early. And to this day, even though I still say I'm earth shape agnostic, when I'm in a conversation with someone, I saw an old friend from high school not long ago. They came to visit, and they were like, "You don't really believe everything you talk about on that show, do you?" And I hate when people say that, because they're being facetious. They're trying to, they're being facetious. They're trying to kind of frame it as there's a lot of bullshit on your show and you know it, right? Which makes me sound like a grifter. So no, that's not exactly true. That's not a proper framing of what happens around here. And they'll say, well, what's something that you've covered that you don't believe? And I always go to flat earth. But then, because they'll be like, okay, well, that's obvious. And I say, okay, well, do you know the best arguments for the flat earth? Do you know any arguments that they would make? And then they would say no. And I say, you know, something I think is funny, the people who are so convinced, religiously convinced of the conventional model know the least about it. I say, how many miles around is the earth? And nobody knows. My buddy was like 100,000. Like, no, a quarter of that, 26,000. You know, and then I start talking about the distances you can see. I mean, you guys have been through it all, but the introductory stuff. And again, I don't come to a conclusion, but I do say there is a lot of interesting data there that you can't just dismiss. And so I try to bring people around. So, you know, the conversation starts with someone essentially accusing me of grifting and saying I don't believe the things on my show. And by the time I get through the conversation, I've got them wondering if there is something to the flat earth. So I've developed a pretty good pathway through navigating those conversations, because they all are the same. But yeah, I think
Yeah,
the flat earth is very interesting. It brought me back to God. I'll say that. From atheism, it brought me back to the notion of a creator, which brings you back into the David Icke stuff and the whole fractals of the Godhead thing. And I think I just say realm. I say realm because I think the observer effect is real. What you intend to see sometimes does manifest, but I don't know if there's any space out there. I think that the space agencies are doing more occult ritual than they are science. And when you go further back, even that, it's hard to define the difference between science and occult exploration because it is just testing hypotheses and getting results.
Yeah, back in the day when they were founding the JPL and stuff, they're like, why are y'all out in the desert practicing sex magic? And they're like, they put on their white lab coat and they're like, it's science,
Right. You turn in the black robe for a white lab coat and everybody's convinced it's something different.
Yeah, there's so many elements also to the white lab coat and the parallel with priesthoods. Ancient.
Yes.
The ancient priesthood of Israel had the white linen garments, and then you have in the modern age, it's really juxtaposed in an interesting way, but it's all connected to Apollo. So you have the Hippocratic Oath with the medical industry, and that's the induction into a very open and very clear priesthood system. I mean, there's no other profession that has more of a god complex than doctors, right?
Yes.
I mean, you can maybe make an argument for other CEO type positions, but the most common god complex job is the doctor, right? I know more than you, and so you need to listen to me and shut up. And then that's equivalent over on the space exploration side. It's because you have the Apollo missions and the other side of the men in white lab coats that are all about cosmology and the hoodoo that they put in front of us with their imagery, saying this is exactly what you should believe, even though it's a painting or whatever. And so there's that balancing act of an expert society, an expert-led society where people can't question unless they're voicing an expert's opinion, because it's really weird how our society is formed around expert-led talks to where in Congress somebody's like, oh, I can't define genders because I'm not a gender studyist or whatever, and
right. No, that is absolutely true. It's all trust the experts, and we were set up for that before COVID, but it's even worse now. And that's the thing, is going back to the conversation about the new alternative media, they shot their shot with COVID, and a lot of them lost so much credibility that they now have another net to capture people in, because some of the same people who gave up on watching Fox News are now in the Tucker camp. And I think David Icke, going back to him, he is right when he says that the big secret is that the power is in you, that you really are leading this life of yours. You are moving towards your free will, or you have the capacity to. You have a lot more freedom, but the world out there is trying to convince you have no freedom and everything's being taken away from you. And you better cling to that job, because if you lose it, you'll probably be homeless and just completely fucked on the street. And there is some of that. I can't say that it's not at least in the mix, but I think the big secret is that you don't need to focus on the external world all that much, or at least you need to give equal attention to your internal world. And so from the David Icke perspective, they'll tell you any external truth under the sun because it keeps you looking out and not in. So they're willing to give up a lot of breadcrumbs to the truth as long as it keeps you engaged with, I gotta see what Tucker's next episode is and how crazy this one's gonna get and how crazy this one's gonna get, because it is ultimately all a distraction if you aren't also giving equal attention to your inner world and why you came down here and what you're tasked to do, and getting full enjoyment out of the one life you have. I just turned 40. I still feel very young, but I'm like, God, this ride's half over. Feels like it just started.
Yeah. You mentioned all of the different things that are coming out and that are trying to get our attention. And if we could shift maybe a little bit more towards current events and your perspective on what's going on in the world, it really does seem like this year there's been a fire hose of agendas and conspiracy confirmations that it's almost like they're we're juggling balls, all these different things we're trying to pay attention to, and they're just Sun Tzuing us art of warfare, overwhelming force type thing, to where they're hoping we'll drop a ball. And so how do you, as a an expert in navigating some of these conversations, how do you prioritize what to pay attention to? How do you sift past the overwhelming force and find the thing that they're actually trying to conceal by all the other things they're putting in front of you?
Right, the signal and the noise. It is tough. You just look for patterns, and I think most of the time you look for the esoteric elements that are layered into an event. Take the Harvest Festival shooting, for example, going back to that in Vegas. There's so many weird esoteric elements to it, from the fact that, so you're always going to find 33s in these events, and a lot of times it is 33/32. There'll be this like ambiguity between the two numbers, and that's because as you go up the Freemasons thing, 32 is the last official level, and then there's 33, so it's kind of a symbolic level. And this is seated in events. Paddock was shooting from the 33rd floor or the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel, but it's actually 33 if you count the lobby. So it's always this like, or there'll be like 33 dead. Always pay attention to that. We could talk about the Charlie Kirk thing, which is a real mystery. That one does have me kind of perplexed. So first off, I think always kind of step back from it and don't get too emotionally invested in any conclusion. I think that's a big problem.
Yep.
I see so many people that they're like, this was a simulated event. I know it. And if anyone says anything to the contrary, they're a fucking idiot. And it's like, well, hold on now. Do you really think the elite have a problem just offing a guy who went off message? I don't. So like, and I thought about this the other day. Would people analyze JFK and MLK and John Lennon the same way if we had the internet like we do today? They probably would. But we just assume, oh no, they just killed somebody who was speaking too much truth. That's not hard to believe at all. They send tens of thousands, millions to go to war, and they just let them die over oil rights or something. They don't give a fuck about us. So it's not hard for me to believe someone gets killed. But there's also another perspective where it's like, maybe there is a club where, like the mafia, this is a made man, and you can do anything you want to the non-made people, but when someone's made, they play a role and then they exit the stage and they don't actually die and they go live in Valhalla or something. But there's a lot of 33s in that. Kash Patel, he on his initial report was like, well, we found the guy after 33 hours. It's like 33 hours. That's so weird. Wouldn't you say 2 days or a day and a half?
Right.
And then he said it 3 different times. And one of the times he messed up and he said, we got him at about 36 hours. And then he says 33 to be exact. It's like, well, what difference does it make? Did you look at your clock and the stopwatch and you're like, we got the guy now, 33 hours? No, somebody told you that you need to say this and stressed its importance. And so you fumbled through a presentation where you said it 3 times because you were thinking about how you were told you had to say it. I just think he's a pawn being told what to say. And I think what's funny about the Trump administration is so many people were elevated to these positions who aren't normally in them. So they're very clunky and very sloppy at, there's no tact. Donald Rumsfeld could deliver a 33 and you wouldn't bat an eye. But, I just don't think that they're as seasoned at it. So it's like the Charlie Kirk thing, the footage is quite traumatizing. I've seen so many little things in there that make me think, was this AI? Is there AI out there that's so advanced that it could simulate this whole thing and we wouldn't know? I would say probably, right? Now, just because the technology exists doesn't mean it's used in this exact case. But there was one piece of footage I don't see many people talking about where the camera panned across the crowd and there was one guy looking up at the camera and like cheering and chanting. Uh-huh. And to me, it's like that. When I've messed with AI video, there's always something off. Like you could say the prompt is, I want the crowd to be panicked and screaming and like running away, and 99% of them will. But there'll be one person like bouncing a ball in the corner or doing something. So people look at that footage and they say, when they look at that footage, they say, oh, that must have been a guy who was in on it, or some ultra liberal who was like happy it happened. I go, no. In the moment, if you're in a crowd and someone is capped in front of you, I don't care if you think it's Hitler. You're not happy about it. You're worried about not getting shot yourself. So this was very odd behavior from this one clip. And I'm like, maybe the whole thing was AI. There's not a lot of witnesses out there to this event. There's a lot of people wondering about where the bullet came from because there's strange behavior of it. If it's a digital bullet, we'll be chasing it forever. We'll never find where the bullet came from if it didn't actually come from somewhere. What else? The relationships in the Charlie Kirk thing are so odd. His wife, that's where you got to look how deep that goes. Mm-hmm. Why is she winning a pageant that Trump owns way before she ever meets him? And then now she's the CEO. And now they're trying to co-opt the fact that, he loved Israel. Well, he wasn't saying that right before you killed him, but you killed him. And then you just go back to the older messages he was delivering and you say, see, he was one of us. And so there's a lot of funny stuff going on there. I'm curious what you guys think. If I think the level 1 conspiracy, if you take the conspiracy slider to just a basic right below the surface, it's like he was taking a lot of Jewish money. He was exalted to this position to generate a new wave of young conservatives that would also be loyal to Israel. That last part was very important. He started to go off message and they said, whoop, before you go too far, we're going to cap you. And we already installed your wife as your handler. And now she's going to move into the position and take over. And we're going to get right back on message with all the right people. That's the level 1 conspiracy. And level 2 is like the whole thing was simulated. He was tasked to play this role from an early age. I mean, why does all of it sync up with the movie Snake Eyes? That's so fucking weird. So I try to be open to both. I'm curious what you think. Did they really kill a guy in front of us, or was it all simulated?
I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, when you brought up JFK, it kind of blew my mind because at TrutherCon, I'm doing a presentation of where the fatal shot came from.
I know. They're in the sewers.
Yep. How'd you know?
You're the sewers guy.
Yeah,
I do a little bit of digging before I come on.
All right, I see you. But I compare it at the end to why it still matters, because that's what was important to my dad, and why it still matters today, I believe, was they took out Charlie Kirk, the same powers that be. Same powers that be that took out JFK, took out Charlie Kirk. What you want to make with that is, whatever. But I don't know. I need to see why is there no cell phone evidence from other people that were there? That's weird.
Also, that is very weird. And the other thing that I was just reminded of is no coroner's report. No, that they moved the body. They did that little fake funeral thing. It wasn't even a funeral. It was just her laying her hands on the body and showing off her Freemasonic ring and shit. That happened very soon. But there's all kinds of things in a paper trail that happens when someone dies, and a lot of that is missing in Charlie Kirk. Or here's the thing. They say it's missing. I don't have a lot of experience combing through those kinds of records, and I'm probably not going to firsthand go and try to find them. But I've read a lot of things from people that say, I work in embalming, and this is not real. There's no way you could get a body prepared that fast, especially open casket, which they showed. The hands don't look right. The button, they say, I've read 2 different people who say, I work in this industry. You always button the buttons of someone's vest and you lay their hands on their side, not over them, because it's just rigor mortis sets in and you don't bend the elbows like that. You put the arms alongside the body. And the guy was capped in the neck. That requires some work to repair. Mm-hmm. So you can't just the next day put him on a plane and then have this little thing, this mock funeral. So there's a lot of weird stuff like that.
My wife brought up something interesting. She's a teacher, and they have to go through training about how, like, if a kid starts bleeding, what do you do? So the first thing you do is you try everything you can to stop the bleeding, even if it's shoving paper towels or whatever you have to do. That's what you do. Nobody did that.
Yeah, and then there's the thing about the guy picked up his chair. So a guy gets capped, falls off a chair. A dude from behind him picks up that chair, climbs up, and starts messing with the camera behind him. You're touching a crime scene, brother. What are you doing? So there's a lot of weird, unless you know it's not a crime scene, unless you knew this was going to happen, you didn't seem surprised. That's another thing. Have you seen this video where, so when he got capped, he was actually talking to a member of the crowd who had just asked him a question. It's very weird because I could be getting it wrong, but I think Charlie Kirk's very last word was violence. They just started to talk about, trans violence and shootings, and I think the literal last word he said is violence, and then he gets shot in the neck. It's just so, that's one of those esoteric things that's just odd. But the guy that he was talking to in the crowd who was asking the question, there's now footage that's come out of him basically practicing for being surprised. There's a camera, and he goes like, he rubs his hands through his hair like, oh my God, what did I just see? And he does this motion while talking to someone. This is hours before the actual thing happened. And then you watch the footage of him live when the event happens, and he does the exact same motion because he was practicing feigning surprise. What's that about?
Yeah.
It doesn't tell us if Charlie was actually killed or not, but it tells us that this event was so orchestrated that even the person asking the question at the moment the shot was fired knew what they were doing. That wasn't an organic situation. So it's so controlled, but is it fake? Is it simulated? I just don't know. And there's nothing wrong, I don't think, with holding two ideas in your head either. I say, why so serious? Why get emotionally attached to a conclusion? And then also, let's hold multiple ideas in our head so that we can fold in new evidence and kind of stack them in terms of what's most likely. I think most likely he was killed, and it was just a very well coordinated and structured situation, because the other factor is getting rid of the evidence right away. People focus on the trap door that was under where he was, and it's like, okay, there did seem to be some kind of door there. That is odd, but the reason we know there's a door there is because they were peeling away all the structural material from the scene. That's what you do when you want to just remove evidence of a crime, of something actually occurring there. 9/11, they put all the wreckage on barges and got it out of the country. Well, wait a minute, you probably shouldn't be touching that until a full investigation's been done. But the rules don't apply when you're dealing with some conspiratorial event. They get the evidence out, they move the scene around so much that it's over. We can't assess it now. Yep. You fucked it up.
Yeah, I have a particular view of why this whole scene was the trauma event. Not only the fact that it happened on 9/10, right, the day before our previous trauma event. There's also an element of the time frame from so whenever he was shot on 9/10, there was a lot of things happening on that same day legislatively. So there was the Epstein vote. There's also the concept of he was like, so whether or not he was this was an organic shooter that took him out, or it was a contrived conspiracy that the deep state took him out, the point is they're not going to let this go to waste. And right. Charlie Kirk is becoming the sacrificial lamb of what I believe is the beginnings of a state-based religion again. You see a lot of the verbiage of Trump. We need to bring God back into the state. We need to bring God and the belief in God back into politics and what we're doing. And so you see Charlie Kirk and a lot of the memorials being propped up to the level of a martyr of, on the level of Jesus Christ. Like they put his name right up there next to all the great martyrs of the age. And
right.
And it's interesting because you have the very Catholic influence in the United States government. J.D. Vance. You have the first American Catholic Pope. All the popes are Catholic, but you know what I mean. The popes from Chicago, right? And then you have the Supreme Court justices, a majority of them being Catholic. There's articles coming out that Charlie Kirk was this close to publicly converting to Catholicism. His wife is a very Catholic individual. And so whenever you think about what the ancient Catholic Church represented and their influence on state and politics, it comes straight out of the Roman Empire. And what is the Roman Empire? It's a system of government that has a state-based religion that kind of bolsters it, right? And so they needed this icon, this pang in the heart of the American people to want them to be opened up to this concept of bringing religion back into the state. And that's exactly what you see with Turning Point USA and this, you know, the faith and belief of Charlie being used to propel this kind of religious motivated politics. And now we obviously, our channel, we personally are Bible believers, and we consider the scriptures as, you know, valuable, and we have our own set of understanding of faith. But there is pseudo religion. There is the false Christ that is presented as the Messiah, right? And so the system of deception, it could be called Christianity. There could still be truth in Christianity, and we do believe there is truth there. But Christianity and that whole topic of religion is used to deceive. Like, many people come saying Jesus is the Christ, and they will lead many astray. It's the concept that, you know, they needed something to traumatize people to make them show up, and that's exactly what we saw. We are seeing the largest revival across the nation as all of these people are like, oh, well, you know, I feel emotional because I saw a guy shot in the neck, and so I want to go to church now. And then as soon as I go to church, I'm going to sign up for TP USA, and I'm going to start going to college campuses just like Charlie, you know. And so there's like this leading element to it, and so it is very interesting, you know, the connection with Charlie Kirk's wife and Trump and it's definitely a mass trauma event. And why are mass trauma events used is because it triggers something in our mind that causes that fight or flight response. Yeah. And that's how people are controlled. Whenever you have that energy.
The only other thing I wanted to say before it leaves my mind, because, you know, simple stoner mind, things come and go quite quickly. But yes, they exalted Charlie Kirk, put him right up alongside Jesus like that. You know who else they did that with is George Floyd. And they both have the exact same birthday. Did you know that? George Floyd and Charlie Kirk.
I gotta put that in my phone. That's gonna.
I believe it's even the year. Charlie Kirk, I think, would have been 32 this year, shot right before his 32nd birthday. So it is almost like one for them, one for us. You know, I say us. I'm not a Christian, but I definitely consider myself more on the conservative side. But it is just interesting because you have the two-party divide, and they both got a martyr. You know, you can say what you want about each one and how worthy. What's funny is that the people on the other side spend a lot of time denigrating the dead and how bad of a person they actually were. It is exactly a mirror. You know, people on the right are like, well, George Floyd was a fentanyl criminal. And I really don't care. I don't think anyone should be, have their life cut short. Let's just say that. People say it wasn't the knee on the neck. People say a lot of stuff in the details. Sure, but let's zoom out. This guy it seems like he was killed in a ritual, whether it was the knee on the neck or something else. It seems like he was killed in a ritual. No one talks about the fact that George Floyd and the officer knew each other from previous work. Like, that's a personal relationship. That should be taken into account. So again, was that staged? Is he even dead? Sometimes you have to ask these things. But when you zoom out, you do look at archetypally, both sides of the divide got a sacrificial lamb where it created a huge outrage, and the other side has zero empathy for the dead and the supposed dead. And they look at them as like, well, here's all the reasons why you shouldn't care about this person being killed on camera in front of you. And again, you know, I'm saying that this is what it looks like. It looks like both of these people were killed on camera in front of us. And it was very traumatic to watch for a lot of people, and it changed their view. And I just find it interesting, that complete mirroring of the situations and them having the same birthday. I don't know. That's why I say is simulation's not right, but it seems like we're in a play. I like that more than I like. I think it's more of a theater. It's a theater of archetypes, and sometimes scripts are reused, or scripts contain some of the exact same elements. And it might go back to the occult stuff where they're just like, well, we already know if you want to performatively show an event, if you just seed it with all these numbers and stuff, then it's most likely going to be more potent. That's one perspective. Another one is they put the numbers in so that other people in the club know that it's one of their events. You see a couple of 33s and you're like, oh, okay. So this is not something to pay attention to or organic. It's just the people in my same club doing their thing. I mean, I can't decide, but it just seems like it's too eerie of a coincidence, and there's something definitely to it. There is another perspective that Richard Willett, who works for Iconic and does shows there, I interviewed him, and he basically talked about the biblical script they're running through. The Bible and Christianity, not a big deal to me. I went to a private school. I know the gist of I know the stories and all that. But to me, it's something that's so far removed from me being able to verify through both time and manipulation that I can only halfway care about it, because I just don't know how much manipulation. There's been a lot of death in its name. It's definitely been used by state powers before. And as you pointed out, it might be used by state powers right now. So I try not to get too obsessed or emotional about it. But the script that they seem to be running, according to Richard Willett, is that the plan is to unite the world against Israel so that everyone attacks and destroys Israel, because that sets off the next stage of the thing. So if you fast forward to, if you think about the Charlie Kirk thing as a staged event, and then you look at problem, reaction, solution, and what is the reaction? The reaction is all this shade at Israel. Same with Epstein. It's like everybody tracks it right back to Israel, and they're the bad guys, and we need to stop giving them money. And there's a perspective where you take the conspiracy slider all the way, and you're like, this is all manufactured. They're trying to make it super, super obvious. They're giving all of our tax money to Israel until more and more people do see it. The goal is for you to get so frustrated with Israel that you're okay with them getting wiped out. So, and then a lot of people say, good, finally, we got that monkey off our back. It's like, yeah, don't you see you're being played into that perspective too? But we will see. But you could see how the Charlie Kirk thing folds in there, because if Israel killed him, a lot of people are like, Israel's not our friend. Epstein thing, Israel's not our friend. And sure enough, we'll see what happens in the next 5 years or so. It's odd that they're playing both sides with the Saudis, the Qataris, and then also Israel, because, they're not friends. But we might see everyone get united against Israel, something very, very bad happen. A lot of innocent people who were just born on the wrong side of an imaginary line die for the cause. And then apparently that's when the Antichrist is supposed to be able to reemerge. I mean, you guys know that the details of that better than me, but I just thought it was interesting, the whole idea that for it to unfold, you have to unite the world against Israel. So Israel has to do some very, very bad, obvious things to frustrate everyone into the position that they're supposed to be in and let Israel go down.
It's that bullwhip effect where they actually want you to be is where you naturally end up when you overreact to the first agenda, right?
Yes.
And it's interesting the parallel prophetic unfurling that happens, right? So like I would put forward that there is like a rippling effect of prophecy, where if the creator actually spoke something that revealed something prophetic, it's so true that it ripples in a wave that repeats throughout time. And so I believe these powers, they see that wave and they jump on the wave to ride it for their agendas. And so that's why you see them trying to play out Albert Pike's 3 letters, where you have 3 world wars, and the final world war is like the faiths and religions all coming to destroy each other so that they can replace it with Luciferianism or whatever. And
right.
And so they're interpreting into their events, I think, riding this wave of, a repeating cycle that can be empirically derived from history, You know, you've had many antichrist rise and many, you know, dictators and proud mouths stand up, and then there's a pattern of how society falls and operates under these dictators throughout history. And so in the modern age, what they're trying to do, you know, the Americas being the new Atlantis, the phoenix out of the ashes thing. And so I think what we're seeing here is them trying to ride this pseudo wave of prophecy so that our collective consciousnesses, we're all like, okay, well, we're expecting the Antichrist. And then they're like, all right, did you know the Bible says the Antichrist rules the whole world? Well, that's exactly what we want. You know?
Yes. Oh, I love the Peter Thiel thing where he's giving this lecture on the Antichrist, and that journalist from New York Times, if you saw that interview, God, that's one of my favorite interviews because that guy really did a good job and I wouldn't have expected him to. But he says to Peter Thiel, he's like, if you're so concerned about the Antichrist, don't you think the Antichrist would benefit from a lot of the technology that you yourself are building and implementing, centralized data collection and surveillance grid stuff? Further centralization is what allows for one person to reign over everyone. You need centralized systems, and you're the guy building them. And he's like, oh, I don't know. I guess I'm going to do a lecture and try to walk this back. So now he's got this 4-part lecture series. Yeah, it's wild. And I do agree, like riding the wave thing. And earlier you kind of alluded to the phrase, you know, never let a good crisis go to waste. Things happen in the world, and then they adjust and they try to steer it in a certain direction. I do think that, but at the same time, the Harvest Festival, Jason Aldean is on stage at the exact time the shooting starts out, and he has the tattoo of the card from the Illuminati game. You know, that's not organic. Or just Snake Eyes, the movie. If you've done that deep dive, I watched the movie after I started hearing about it. It's so layered. A guy named Charles Kirkland gets shot in the neck at a public event on September 10th. Now there's some debate. People say, oh, 90s footage was so grainy that the date on the poster is actually September 3rd, not the 10th. I don't know. I watched the movie and I didn't just look at still shots. And when I looked at it with my wife, maybe we saw the September 10th because we were expecting it, but like we looked at it and said, yep, there it is. And nothing looked weird to us. It looked as it should look. So it's, again, one of those things where the universe gives you clues, and then it also kind of like leaves a little door open for, well, maybe it's something else. But again, you don't need the date. People want to make a big deal about maybe the date's off. Okay, fine. A guy named Tyler creates the distraction. You know, Tyler is a boxer in the movie who takes a fall, the fall guy. Tyler the executioner. Again, it's so layered. And then Charles Kirkland gets shot in the neck because he won't go along with a military-industrial project, which is a Iron Dome. And who is the Iron Dome associated with? Israel. And this movie came out in the mid-90s. How does this work? I can't figure it out. Does someone in the deep state, do they have a meeting and they say, okay, well, we need to kill Charlie Kirk, so we need to come up with a template. Let's comb the Hollywood archives for the template we're going to use. That doesn't seem right. But I just can't logic out how these things exist unless we're in like some kind of timeless realm. If you know Joseph Campbell's work about the hero's journey and how almost every single film, especially ones that are resonant, fold directly into the hero's journey template, maybe that's just one template of 1,000 templates that actually run in this reality, like narratives that have a gravity to them, like some kind of energetic effect. But then the flip side to that, see, I talk myself in circles, but the flip side to that is how come we only see conspiratorial events that have all this meaning in Hollywood films? You know, all the references to 9/11 before it happened. Neo's passport in the Matrix expiring on September 11th, 2001, the exact day. Neo's passport in the Matrix, it's like there's also a meaning in the film. It's not just like some arbitrary date. It's a film about your reality changing forever and you entering into a new reality, a new level of awareness. And what is the thing that did that for everyone? 9/11. And it also created the Patriot Act, started us on the surveillance state pipeline that we're on now. So like the layers of meaning are so deep. And how does it happen? It really boggles my mind. But if it was just a natural phenomenon, then you would think that you would see these patterns just in your regular life, like with movies like You Got Mail or something, random generic movies, but that's not what happens. It's the conspiratorial events that we watch and see, and then we find how deeply embedded they are in other media. I say media because it is often movies, but there's some album covers, some songs, and then also the Illuminati card game, which is a type of media. So there is some connective tissue there, and it only applies to conspiratorial events. It doesn't pertain to mundane events. It doesn't pertain to big events that happen in the world that aren't tragic. It only applies to tragic events that are suspicious. And that's a clue to something.
Yeah, or maybe we just don't have the eyes to see these events, because the conspiratorial events, you have enough attention on it that people are able to find these connections, these allegories spiritually or worldwide. But the ones that just go by, like the Suez Canal got blocked up by a big freighter. Like there has to be some kind of like metaphor maybe on the world scene that sometimes these events represent. And maybe it's the traumatic conspiracy ones that we all are able to unpack because we're all thinking about it. But there are common like things that occur during the world, like a news headline that comes by and it's just like, oh, no big deal, it's just an event. But there is like something to it that's showing a deeper reflection of the state of the earth and the way that people's minds are at that time. And so you mentioned the astrology and birth charts. And there does seem to be a narrative aspect of that where you have the stars representing certain narrative elements, and when somebody's born, they interpret from those narrative elements aspects of their personality, their life trajectory, and so there does seem to be a reflection of this realm and the things that happen during world events that does reveal a spiritual layer that we're just not able to tap into easily.
Well, I do think it is a spiritual layer. I think you're right there. But, I have considered, and I still continue to consider the perspective that you're offering, that we're looking at these events, and so we're giving them our attention, so we're noticing these things. But I don't know, it doesn't resonate with me as the true thing. Like, for example, people do notice other patterns. I'm sure if you've ever looked at it, it's pretty compelling to see all the syncs between JFK and Abraham Lincoln, right? Have you gone down this rabbit hole? Like,
Oh yeah.
Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy. Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln. And then it goes on from there. There's like 24 weird coincidences with birthdays and this and that. Well, I mean, we've had 45 presidencies, not presidents, but presidencies. And these are the two that were assassinated. These are the two that have conspiracy attached to their death and some kind of hidden agenda going on. It's not like Ulysses S. Grant and Carter have all these connections. This is the connections. It's these two. And so again, I go to like, I don't know, man. I really think maybe it's the universe trying to tell us, hey, dig deeper into this. If there is an astral realm of archetypes and spiritual beings, and they live outside of time, and they're looking at our reality as maybe like a slideshow of slides, and you can look at any slide at any point in time. Maybe they're picking out the slides where like, hey, the bad guys are with you here, 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 and here. Let's like wave the magic wand and put some extra emphasis on these things. Or, where do ideas come from at all? Maybe the guy who wrote Snake Eyes, he's getting the ideas he thinks from his own head, but an idea comes into your head and you write it down and you keep writing, and that becomes the script. But who really wrote the script? Where did the ideas come from? Where did they truly emerge in your consciousness? Were you being led along? And I believe, I looked into this, the director of the movie, Brian De Palma, I believe, he co-wrote. So it's not often that the director co-writes with the writer, but in this instance, they did interviews at the time where they said that Brian De Palma directed and co-wrote the movie. And you'd have to look this up to verify it. I could do it, but pretty sure Brian De Palma's birthday is 9/11. So what's that? That's just another one of those things. And again, it's the conspiratorial events. Like you could take I mean, it's hard because almost all major events that come to my mind immediately are conspiratorial. But you know, why isn't his birthday the signing of the Declaration of Independence? You know, why isn't his birthday the day that the
420?
Yeah, 420 or you know some big event. I was gonna say the launching of the Titanic. I'm like, no, that doesn't work. You know, but any major thing that the first time the Wright brothers put a plane in the air. You know, just a historical event that has a date that doesn't seem to be conspiratorial. His birthday isn't that day. His birthday is 9/11. You know, it's like a tapestry that brings your awareness to a level of like, how deeply manipulated is this realm? Because it seems, the term I always use is too precise for human hands. It seems too dialed in. Like, just to go back to like, never let a good crisis go to waste, or riding the wave. Yeah, you have to ride some waves to control this many people. But what they're doing with something like Snake Eyes, the Jason Aldean tattoo, all these weird syncs, like, it's a lot more than taking advantage of an event. It's actually like hyper controlling an event down to the actual day and names and placements of things. It's just unbelievable. I struggle to figure it out. That's why I just go back to like, look, we are in a realm of theater and the true power is inside you and you should look inside. It's still entertaining to look outside, but don't get so caught up in it that you don't at least find your way, because you're here to do a lot more than observe conspiratorial events until you die.
That's true. Have you ever gone down the Helen Keller rabbit hole? I always bring that up.
I would like to know in particular which one, but so I recently did look up some of this stuff. I was stoned. It was late, so I'm not going to get it all right, but I've always speculated about, you know, how true are any of these stories. But didn't she? Are you talking about the symbol? So there's the thing about the symbol. Okay, sorry. You tell me, and then I'll tell you what I've heard.
Just her being fake deaf and blind. She flew an airplane twice. She had a British accent. Her handler, the person that she could communicate with, was also blind. So the blind or leading the blind.
Leading the blind. Oh.
She was a
poetic.
She was a eugenicist. She was very big into eugenics, and so
that's odd.
All the
You'd be first in line, lady.
Right. So it's like all these different things, and I think that was the first time in American history that they really like tried to see how much they get away with. Well, if we can get away with this, we can get away with faking the moon landing, and they believe it. You know.
Yes, that's you know, I do think they do test the waters with a story like that. Yeah, that's interesting. So the thing I heard about Helen Keller, because a lot of people were talking about Charlie Kirk's wife doing the symbol when she hugged Trump and a couple other times. So this, of course, is I love you in sign language. This is the devil horns. So it's very close. Well, it's again one of those things where if you don't have a skeptical mind, you see her doing that and you just think this is a Catholic woman saying I love you. I'm sorry that the I love you sign is so close to the devil horns. I didn't make that up. It's just the way it is. So I'm sorry that it's close, but what you're really seeing is not devil horns, it's I love you. So then you go and you're like, well, how did that become the sign for I love you? Well, it goes back to Helen Keller apparently as the one who popularized that hand signal. And then you go into her handlers, and I didn't know that her handler was blind, but I did know, or I did read, that they were connected more to like Freemasonry, British aristocracy. Like there is some hidden network involvement with Helen Keller. And so from that perspective, a lot of people like a David Icke would say that they're always trying to popularize Satanism. They're trying to put things out in the popular culture that you don't recognize as nefarious or as dark. And so having this major figure, Helen Keller, say that of all the things you could do with your hands, this is I love you, it gets people all over the country to do this. And maybe on the astral plane, this doesn't mean I love you. Maybe on the astral plane, it has a deeper meaning to like pledging yourself to Satan. So people are doing this symbol that they've been told means something else when there is probably a actual attached meaning that has a lot more potency that goes back to ancient times, and they've popularized it. So
the whole story is bogus. She had 165 IQ. Like, really? She's deaf and blind since she was a baby.
When I was in high school, we had this really offensive band. I'm pretty sure it's all scrubbed, but it was like the Tenacious D was popular at the time, and I'm not a very good singer, but I think I can write words very well. My friends were very good at guitar, and we did this. It was a very offensive Tenacious D type of band, and we had a song about Helen Keller. I wrote a song about her being a fraud. And at the time, it was just like to be provocative, and then I later was like, maybe she actually was a fraud. But part of the lyrics were like, how do you explain concepts like freedom, peace, and love when you can't even like do anything? These are such abstract concepts. Sure, you can probably put a stapler in her hand and be like, here's a stapler, and then she can know when she feels this thing that it's a stapler. Physical objects, I believe, but how are you going to communicate really abstract concepts like that? I struggle with how that could be possible.
And she wrote about books and race. It's like, how do you know what race is? How do you know what any of this is? And that's when I think people started, like, okay.
So there was Ray Charles, and then who's the other
Stevie Wonder.
Blind? Stevie Wonder. I think Stevie Wonder sees.
Oh yeah.
There's definitely some footage out there. So here's the thing. I think that like potentially, when you're making money, agents and these kind of people, they're going to find any way to make money. So I think Ray Charles, let's say Ray Charles is genuine, and you see him out there doing his thing. You're like, okay, we can duplicate that. We just got to get a guy. And so you get a guy like Stevie Wonder who can kind of see, and you say, well, we're just going to say you can't see. But there's a couple of instances where people who are well connected, I don't know if Dick Gregory has said it in particular, but people of his ilk who have seeded things in interviews like, I don't know, not exactly as advertised with him. And then there's footage of him catching a microphone one time.
The victim hero of our age, the victim mentality is really kind of the left paradigm of, I'm a victim, so I need to be raised up on a pedestal. And so when all of the heroes in our modern age are these people with issues, or it's Hawking's in the wheelchair, it's the overcoming paralyzed person, it's all of that, and they make that the hero, then it forces people that don't actually have issues to fake or to desire to have a curse on them, because all of their heroes had curses on them. And so it's almost like the mindset is, oh, you should want to be deaf, dumb, and blind because look how famous and popular Helen Keller was.
Everybody's autistic now, it's like everybody's dyslexic now, everybody's all these things now. It's like, quit trying to put yourself into a victim place.
Another psyop that works with that is you should say, well, I should just be happy with my grocery store job because at least I have my ability to walk and see and this and that. Let them be the celebrities and the musicians, because like I should just be glad I have all my faculties, and I'll just get abused every day in this slave labor type job for barely enough to get by, where I'm going deeper into credit card debt. But at least, I can walk. So like, I'm really doing okay.
I just have one last question, but if you could have one guest, living or dead, who would it be and why?
That's a really good question, and it kind of requires me to look at my bookshelf. There's earlier times in my life I probably would have said Terrence McKenna, though I don't think that's all that important these days. Adam Parfrey. Adam Parfrey is a good suggestion. He wrote Apocalypse Culture 1 and 2. And there are people who I just would like to... I think I could get more out of them with my individual questioning, like a guy like Bill Cooper. Sometimes there's these really bright minds, and they aren't all that well organized. And I think a lot of time with my interviews, I'm trying to take complex material that might sometimes seem scatterbrained, and I'm trying to parse it out logically and be like, okay, this is the best order in which to have people understand your ending conclusions. So I mean, if you're gonna say one, now that I've kind of rambled around and thought about it while I talked, maybe Philip K. Dick, because there's people I'd want to interview if they would give me honest answers. You know, we could get more truth out of them, but you know, that's a big caveat. They're not going to be forced to give me honest answers. Whereas at the end of his life, Philip K. Dick, I'm sure most people know about his download experience and the Valis story, but he definitely said some really wild stuff that I wish I could just be like, clarify that for me. You know, this part I get. Now, this sentence, clarify that for me. No one really did that. He gave a couple of presentations. There's a speech you can watch where he was talking at like a sci-fi conference, and people in the audience were snickering and laughing at him because they wanted to hear him talk about his fictional books. And instead he starts talking about realities constructed of a bunch of different narratives and parallel realities, and that he could verify, or that he seemed very confident to know that somebody messed with the timelines, that the government did some project and screwed it up and put us onto a different timeline, and the universe has been self-correcting. And this was decades before the Mandela effect was ever talked about. This is well before CERN. It's like, that is what I would like to talk to Philip K. Dick about, is like, you got this information. He says when he had this download experience, for people who don't know, obviously he was a prolific sci-fi writer, but there was one day he got a package delivered or something, and the woman who delivered it had a Jesus fish necklace, and the light caught it and it reflected light in a certain way, and he went into a trance state and had this like crazy mystical experience. And when he came out of it, he wrote the Valis books, and Valis it's an acronym for like vastly artificial intelligent system outside of time and space. The exact acronym I don't know, but he was basically talking about, I went into a trance state, my consciousness went outside of this reality, I communicated with an AI, a cosmic AI that isn't in a computer, that's just kind of a cloud-based AI system, and it told me all this stuff about reality and how it actually works. And he's basically, the whole phrase of you can't give pearls to swine or whatever, you know, people who aren't ready to hear something won't hear it. And I watched that presentation and it just hurts, because I'm like, this might be the most insightful thing anyone, maybe not ever, has said, but it's up there. And you fucking idiots can't even process what he's saying. You want him to talk about Blade Runner? I wish I could have been there to be like, I hear you, go on. And if I could do a 2-hour interview with someone to try to unpack the what we have, you know, it would probably be Philip K. Dick at this point.
Yeah, the question being the importance when interacting with these highly intelligent, sometimes esoteric people that have seen, you know, behind the veil, so to speak. And it's almost as if you don't have the right question, you never get to unpack the beautiful present, right? It's
well said.
And so it's like, how do you know what question to ask, you know, coming from a perspective of like, what is wisdom, and how do you delve into it? It's the problem is the wise oftentimes don't admit that they're wise, and they wait for you to hint that they understand something, and so they're waiting for the question. And then if you don't know what question to ask, you know, you're stuck talking about Blade Runner. You know?
Right. Now that you unpack it, I'd probably screw it up, but I'd still like to have tried, or been able to try. He also had his house ransacked by intelligence agencies, and that's curious. He's just a sci-fi author. What are you doing raiding his home? So, and I think that there's a pattern of that too. If you look up at people, there's a YouTube channel called Be Inspired. It's not even conspiratorial, but it's a bunch of people who have like talked like this and said, hey, reality is way different than we realize. And a lot of them have been visited by intelligence, had their work destroyed. Some of them died mysteriously. So it feels like we said earlier, the game is to keep people invested in the physical. and they don't want these clues out there. It's almost like, if you've ever seen the Adjustment Bureau, it's almost like the CIA and FBI, this intelligence network, or the whole story about the Men in Black. There are these beings, I don't even know if they're people, tasked with keeping us on script and keeping everybody vested in the game. It is the Matrix. It's just so crazy. But the more you do the inner work and the more you try to get outside of the box of reality, it seems like if you have success, so first off, you will have success. It seems like almost anyone who tries and tries hard enough can press upon the barriers of reality and find that it is quite malleable. And then if you try to talk about that, your work will be destroyed and you'll be harassed by the government and you might even be killed. So to me, like, that might be the biggest conspiracy there is.
Very good. Well, we want to thank you for coming on. Very much interested in how you think. You know, like I said, you're a collector of conspiracies. You're a connector that can, you know, see that vantage point because you've talked to so many people. And so I think that's the value that we saw in having you on. And we'd love to talk to you in the future, of course. And thank you for coming on Skiba News Nation.
Heck yeah, thanks. I used to call myself a conspiracy talent scout, which is right in the wheelhouse of what you're saying. Is like, when I put the producer hat on of who should I interview, I'm scouting for talent. I'm combing through the vast archives of the internet looking for the people who've said the most interesting things and trying to get them to elaborate. And that's the gig. So yeah, Higherside, thehighersidechats.com. I guess I should get my own domain right. See you there. Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome.
Good luck at the conference. I wish I could join you in Dallas, but it is only 10 days away and I got kids and I didn't hear about it soon enough. But I do want to get out there more in physical space because I am so sick of my whole life being through screens.
Right. Well, I hope you come to TrutherCon 2026 because there will be one. So
I hope so.
Sweet. Well,
we might be deeply into World War III at that point, but I'll still try. Even more important to have gatherings, right?
Right. All right. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you.
November 22nd, 1963 is a day that the world changed forever. Not because of Kennedy. That was the first time the word conspiracy theorist was used to demonize people like us. TrutherCon is very important. It's where us truth seekers are getting together.
If you like what we do here on Skiba News Nation, please like and subscribe. And also share with others so we can grow the biggest truth-seeking community on the internet. Huge shout out to all of our Patreons out there. If you like bonus content, you want some extra Skiba News Nation stuff, please go to patreon.com/Skiba News Nation.
Son of the legendary Rob Jeremiah Skiba.
It's like I don't even want to wake up.